If you walk into a town where no one meets your gaze, leave before the sun goes down. If Halloween passes with no sound of children calling trick or treat, it's not peace, it's a curse lying dormant. And if you ever see yourself stepping out of the shadows, pray it's not the last time you get to be you. Welcome back to Whisper Horror Channel, where secrets never rest. If you're a fan of deep psychological horror and twisted American folklore, don't forget to like, subscribe, and drop us a comment below. Tell us, what would you do if one day your hometown vanished from the map? Now let's enter Hollow Creek, where Halloween never ends. Hollow Creek lay quietly nestled among the forgotten hills, where the faint light was not strong enough to penetrate the thick, suffocating fog. The small town had only a few dozen old houses with gabled roofs, stained wooden walls, and pitted, leaking tiles. The street lights flickered with a weak yellow light, gleaming on the old pavement, as if refusing to shine into the dark corners behind the tightly shut houses. A pine forest surrounded the town like a fortress wall, the wind moaning and howling, occasionally making the windows rattle in broken bursts. The people of Hollow Creek lived a silent life, with very few venturing outside after dark. They moved quickly, avoiding eye contact with strangers, whispering things only for each other to hear. Children passing by would huddle up, looking around nervously, and rush home early, as if they were afraid of something emerging from the darkness at the end of the long street. Also in the cold morning mist, Harold Finch appeared. He wore a baseball cap, a perfectly pressed blue uniform, and a name tag that was always shiny. His gray hair was neatly combed. His eyes, cold and eerily calm, scanned every small alley. In the small control room at the town's central police headquarters, he stared at the security camera system, the electronic eyes rotating constantly over the streets, the square, the shops, and even the backyards of some residents. A diligent young officer asked, "Are these cameras just for self-defense, sir?" He just tilted his head and replied, "Exactly, they keep the peace, so that the residents don't accidentally break the law." Right in the center was an old cement square, where a rotten wooden sign stood, painted over with a blurry white color. Hollow Creek Traditional Law, Halloween. No one was allowed to leave their house after 9 p.m. on October 31st. Do not take down decorations before midnight. Absolutely do not bring up old stories that have passed. A small, dirty boy asked, "Mom, why do we have to keep these things?" His mother quickly grabbed his hand, her face pale, and whispered, "Don't be curious about grown-up business. Get home now." Just one look from Police Chief Finch from afar made them both scurry away awkwardly, their shadows cast long in the cold mist. At the end of the street, 4 children huddled around a dusty police car. Tommy was in the lead, his hair disheveled, holding a can of spray paint and drawing a messy line of graffiti on the car. Rachel stood behind him, with sharp, quiet eyes and a shrewd look that earned the respect of every boy. Danny, plump and always laughing playfully, took the opportunity to mimic Finch's walk when no one was looking. Leah, on the other hand, was trembling, clutching her jacket, both scared and curious. Before they could finish, a steady voice came from behind them. "What are you children doing here?" The group turned around. Harold Finch was standing just a few steps away, his eyes showing no emotion. Tommy answered stiffly in his defense. Rachel was silent. Leah muttered an apology, and Danny hid behind his girlfriend's apron. Finch bent down, picked up the paint can that had fallen to the ground, his eyes not leaving the group of children. Art should be kept at home, or at least you should know how to paint more discreetly. The matter didn't end there. Harold went to each of the 4 children's homes, meeting with their parents one by one. But the difference was that he didn't just scold or warn them. He spoke in a chilling tone. If they do it again, their files will be transferred to the town office. Everyone was speechless. The town office. No one could remember where it was, who worked there, or how a file would be handled. Night fell. Marcus, the only stranger in Hollow Creek this Halloween, dragged his suitcase with its worn-out wheels to an empty inn by the side of the road. He looked tired, his eyes hiding a sense of unease. The inn owner, with a haggard face, looked out through the glass door. When he was getting his room, she leaned in close and whispered, "Don't let the police chief know you're here, you hear me? They don't like strangers." Before the matter could settle, the streetlights flickered, and Finch appeared at the inn. He stood in front of Marcus and said coldly, "There's no room for outsiders here. You should leave Hollow Creek before sunrise." Marcus, his voice hoarse, asked to stay until tomorrow because he was tired. Finch let out a faint, cold smile, Didn't you hear me clearly? It's best if you go now. Finch's reflection disappeared from the glass. When Marcus dragged his suitcase out of the inn, the streets were quiet, and the red flashing cameras watched him. On the town screen, the image showed Marcus walking away alone, but behind him, a blurry figure quietly appeared, and then vanished into nothingness. The camera could not identify it. Marcus set up a tent on the edge of the pine forest. The night was bone-chillingly cold. In a hazy, foggy dream, he saw David, his missing brother, standing hidden by an old streetlight in town. "No one can escape, except you," David whispered, his blurry eyes looking at Marcus. His hands were cold, reaching out through the silvery mist. Marcus woke up with a start, cold sweat soaking his back. The wind howled around the tent like a distant call. Returning to the town the next morning, Hollow Creek looked unusually gloomy. No one mentioned the stranger who had spent the night at the inn. The inn owner avoided looking at Marcus. The children were gone, not gathering on the street. Anyone who saw Marcus looked from afar with suspicious eyes, then quickly turned away, as if his existence had become a cautious echo. The north wind swept through the streets, carrying lively yellow leaves, and shadows of people glided by, cast on the foggy windows. At an old convenience store, Marcus carefully selected bottles of water and cold cans of coffee. In the corner, a notice board with missing persons photos was stained with time. His eyes stopped at a blurry photo with the description, "Missing, last October." The photo was of David, Marcus's brother. His hair, his faint smile, his weary face. Below the photo was the text, "Anyone with information, please contact Hollow Creek Police Headquarters." The old shopkeeper looked at Marcus through her thick glasses and slowly asked, "You know this person?" Marcus's body went stiff, as if time had stopped. For a moment, the sound of the wind whistled on the street, mixed with the damp, decaying smell of the distant forest. It was October 30th. The fog was thicker than usual, and the darkness seemed to solidify around the old cemetery on the edge of town. Tonight in Hollow Creek was Mischief Night, a minor tradition that also held an indescribable sense of resentment. On the sunken graves, a group of teenagers gathered, secretly discussing their plan to vandalize the town. Tommy, his eyes bright and his smile defiant, rolled a cigarette between his fingers. "Tonight we're going to drive Harold crazy." Danny raised his chubby finger and whispered, his face suddenly serious. "Some old guy said the police station basement used to swallow up kids who got taken there." Rachel, half believing and half doubting, gave a faint laugh. "Don't believe that nonsense, Danny. Harold just likes to scare people." Leah looked around and shivered. Her back felt cold from the vague feeling that someone or something was staring at them from within the fog. On the outskirts of town, Marcus was moving through the darkness on a trail that cut through the pine forest. He was holding an old map, with every detail David had hand-drawn in his notebook, the ink blurred but still visible. The wind rustled through the trees, the sound echoing like whispers. Marcus froze when he reached the town boundary marker. The old streetlight suddenly came on all at once, and stretched out like a signal. He was startled, and didn't dare to step into the circle of light. On each streetlight, a security camera was mounted, its lens pointing directly at Marcus, as if waiting for the stranger to return. In the cold midnight air, the four children moved along the dark corners, taking out their mischief tools. Tommy leaned over and smashed a decorative pumpkin light in front of the rectory door, its gooey inside spilling onto the steps. Rachel wrote, "Free Hollow Creek" on the church wall. Danny laughed loudly, tearing a black ribbon that someone had tied around the statue of Jesus. Tommy held his head high and walked straight to the police station gate, spitting on the house number plate and laughing gleefully. "Hello, Supervisor Finch." At that very moment, the light on top of the station flickered, blinking on and off repeatedly. Everything around them seemed to fall silent for a second. The group was about to run when Leia suddenly froze. In the middle of the misty street, a small child appeared, his back to the darkness, wearing a pumpkin mask and holding an orange bucket of candy. "Look," Leia called out in a panic, but when Rachel looked back, no one saw anything but the smooth darkness. When Leia turned around, the pumpkin child had vanished without a trace, leaving only a cold mist and a strange whistling sound. The police car lights suddenly flashed. Harold Finch walked slowly out of the darkness, with no hint of anger, his voice low but cold and etched. "It's time for you children to learn how to be silent during the Festival of the Dead." He handcuffed the group without questioning them. In Finch's eyes there was something weary and exhausted, full of both threat and pity. The children were herded into the car. They knew that tonight's pranks would not end as usual. Harold quietly led the group of children to the back door of the station, down a gloomy staircase that led to a large iron door in the basement. The door slammed shut with a chilling sound. He took out their phones, turned each one off, and said, "If you want to get out of here, be silent in every sense of the word." The lights went out with a snap. The thick darkness tightened around their every sense. The air in the room was thick with the smell of old bricks and cold dampness. There was a blurry shadow on the wall. Leah, trembling, ran her hand along the wall, touching something sharp and jagged. A tiny light from Rachel's lighter shone on a jagged, blood-stained inscription. "He's killing us one by one." Rachel's palm was sticky with dry, brownish-red matter. The group shivered, holding their breath. Across the street, Marcus watched from afar. He saw Harold take the children into the station and not come out for nearly 3 hours. The wind grew stronger, and the pine trees hit the police station windows. Marcus found the back door. The lock was brand new, but there was a dark, not quite dry bloodstain on the step below. A gut feeling urged him to press his ear to the metal door and listen. Inside, it was completely silent, but the ground seemed to be emitting an unusual heartbeat. Inside the concrete room, the children huddled together, their breathing frantic. Suddenly, somewhere in the wall behind them, there was a faint, rhythmic, and painful scratching sound. Rachel, trembling, used a coin to knock, and then lit her lighter to see. A real grey finger with a broken nail almost to the quick slowly emerged from a crack. Tommy backed away in a panic. Danny suddenly stammered, "Someone is buried alive behind the wall." The concrete wall was bleeding, and each scratch turned the horrifying myths Danny had told that afternoon into a vivid reality. Danny sat down in the corner, looking up at a small air vent above his head. In the dim light of the moon shining through the bars, he saw a pale face, with hollow eyes that were still moving, attached to an immortal obsession. It was David, Marcus's brother. The face watched unblinking, and a hand slowly pointed toward the iron door of the basement. No one could believe their eyes. The ghost of David was like a real object, both tangible and blurry. Rachel was silent, whispering, "David?" But Danny quickly pulled Rachel back, his heart pounding frantically. Tommy's eyes wandered to the floor, where he discovered a loose wooden cover at the end of the room. He fumbled to open it, and smelled a pungent, bloody odor coming from the winding iron pipes underneath. The blood was still thick and dripping. No longer hesitant, they bravely climbed down into a room filled with the smell of death, and piled high with rotting sacks. The children took turns pulling out each sack, finding a mixture of animal carcasses and small skeletons mixed with hair, of both adults and children. One sack suddenly broke open, revealing a small skull with sunken cheeks. On the left jaw was a familiar sparkling gold tooth. Danny's grandfather, a man the city once thought had died elsewhere, who had been missing since 9. Danny started to sob uncontrollably. The rest of the space was dead silent, with only a vague sound echoing from deep underground, as if an entire hell had not yet found rest. At midnight on October 30th, Hollow Creek was shrouded in a thick fog. Marcus was making his way along a back trail through the pine forest, his heart heavy with doubt and fear. He stopped at the foot of a string of pale yellow lights. The lights flickered, forming a rhythmic pattern. 2 blinks, a pause, then 3 blinks, a mysterious code, as if the town was awake and sending him a secret message. Strangely, the security cameras around town were still rotating as usual, but Marcus knew that tonight they weren't recording him. Every frame left a strange empty space where he appeared. A chill ran down Marcus's spine, and he understood that he had entered a distorted reality, where the line between life and death had become dangerously loose. At the back of the police station, Marcus discovered that the heavy wooden door leading to the basement was securely chained and locked. But one link had been broken, as if someone or something had slipped in before him. With trembling hands, Marcus carefully squeezed through the narrow gap, feeling the sharp, cold air and the musty smell rising from underground. He went down the creaky old stone stairs, holding his flashlight tightly, feeling as if each step was touching a buried past, or something even more terrifying than the past. At the end of the underground hallway, the group of teenagers who had just returned from the room of corpses realized that Leah, the youngest member, had vanished. Rachel rushed to call out, her voice echoing in the stone arches, but she only got a weak reply, "Help," which echoed from very far away, as if through many layers of walls, and then fell completely silent. Under their feet, a new streak of blood began to seep out from under the wall, slowly spreading, cold like an evil omen. Tommy panicked, Danny's eyes were blurred with tears, and Rachel gritted her teeth, enduring the thick web-like fear that covered her mind. Unwilling to give up, Rachel felt along the damp, watery wall. Her finger touched a loose brick. She pried it open, and found an old rusty iron box inside. Rachel's palm trembled as she opened the lid. Inside the box was an old police ID, a broken pocket watch, and a stack of black and white photos. She pulled out each one, portraits of people who had been missing for decades, including children, and some wearing police uniforms. Suddenly, a familiar one appeared, Marcus's father, who was once an internal affairs inspector at the police department and had mysteriously disappeared many years ago. Rachel grabbed Tommy's foot, and they exchanged a cold look. For the first time, the truth about the disappearances in Hollow Creek seemed to burst into plain view. The long-standing rule was just a thin curtain covering an old crime. On the old moss-covered floor above, Marcus rummaged through the storage room and found a small notebook belonging to David, his unfortunate brother. The last page was scribbled with hurried handwriting. "I'm being watched. A shadow of Harold is weighing down my every step from behind. I believe he's hiding something deep beneath the station, a deadly secret. If I disappear, look under the stone floor." The fragmented lines were like gasps for air, as if David had written them in a panic, feeling death coming very close. Marcus walked along the dark hallway, with cold drafts of air blowing up from cracks in the stone walls. Every time his flashlight blinked, the space would suddenly warp, and the shadows would dance wildly. Marcus turned his head, and suddenly saw David appear at the end of the hallway, in a pale blue light, his face half rotted, and the other half still holding a look of pain and sincerity. David did not scream. He just quietly pointed to the stone wall behind the wooden shelves, where the light never reached. Marcus was both relieved and heartbroken, as if someone was squeezing his heart. He fumbled for each stone like a sleepwalker, clearly hearing a faint muffled laugh echoing in the air. Upstairs, Harold was checking the cameras when a small alarm began to click from the basement. His face turned to stone as his eyes fell upon a new scratch on the control panel. He took out a large scalpel and put a small gun in his pocket. Carefully locking the main door, Harold put a flashlight on his shoulder and quietly went down the winding stairs, transforming into a silent and dangerous hunter. But tonight, the prey was him. Inside the stone wall that David had pointed to, the teenagers fumbled and discovered a round room. In the center was a large rough stone table, covered in dark, dry bloodstains. The surrounding stone walls were covered with Latin inscriptions, carved with human finger bones, jagged like extinguished candles in a dungeon. Tommy bent down and picked up a rusty pendant with the name Emily Carter engraved on it. She was Rachel's older sister, who had disappeared when Rachel was just 6. Rachel was silent, unable to let out a single tear. There was only a petrified pain in her bones and flesh. Just as Harold was getting close, Marcus found the group of teenagers. The children sobbed and clung to him. Harold's footsteps echoed from above, each heavy step filled with killing intent. Marcus whispered instructions for the children to crawl through an old coal chute that led outside. Rachel, filled with regret, turned back and rushed to grab the iron box of evidence from the loose brick. She then immediately followed the group. They scrambled through the dust and the pungent smell of coal, and Harold's hand was only a few steps from the exit, the clicking sound of a knife echoing in the cold air. The teenagers and Marcus made it to the edge of town. They sat on the wet grass, hugging each other and gasping for breath after the suffocating panic. Suddenly, Leo appeared from the edge of the forest, walking slowly. She was wearing the same old clothes and holding a tarnished pumpkin mask in her hand. Leah's eyes were empty and pitch black like a bottomless well. Danny ran to her happily, hugging her shoulder. "You're still alive." But Danny's hand was immediately covered in cold black ashes that went through Leah's clothes, and her shoulder was icy cold. Leah looked intently at Danny, the corners of her mouth curving into a crooked smile, like a cracked porcelain doll. She raised the mask to cover half her face. Then a small, instinctive, distorted laugh came out coldly from deep within her throat. No longer a teenage girl's voice, but a distorted chord of many souls mixed together. The night tightened its grip, and the scene blurred. All that remained was Leah's laughter echoing with whispers from the stone walls of Hollow Creek, stretching on as if it would never end. After returning to the group in the hazy darkness at the edge of the forest, Leah seemed to be dragged by an invisible force in the thick mist. The group tried to hold on to her, but Leah suddenly vanished without a trace in the thick fog. In the stillness, a weak, broken voice suddenly echoed, as if being played from a broken cassette tape. "Be careful. He is coming." The cold voice echoed repeatedly, like a mournful warning, making the group shiver, their hearts filled with deep fear and unease. Harold Finch, his face still cold and unchanging, walked toward the back door of the police station. There he discovered a piece of Marcus's shirt caught on the door, a sign of unwanted interference. Instead of making a fuss or alarming the villagers, Harold quietly prepared a hunting rifle and turned on an infrared flashlight. He began to hunt for the person who had invaded his territory on a cold Halloween night, where darkness and gloom became one. Rachel, in pain, shared a terrible family secret with Marcus. Her older sister had gone missing after being arrested by Harold for stealing candy on Halloween a few years ago. Rachel's family was forced to remain silent, not daring to speak the truth. A more terrifying twist was revealed. Rachel's mother used to be the town hall secretary, and Harold had erased all missing persons files from 1992 to 2006, a period that spanned many generations of pain and mystery. At the old convenience store, the old lady who owned the shop whispered to Marcus in a low, muffled voice, filled with both regret and fear, "You shouldn't have come back, but now it's time." She gave Marcus an ancient notebook that meticulously recorded all the disappearances that coincided with Halloween over many decades. On the night of October 31st, a violent thunderstorm rolled over Hollow Creek. The townspeople all experienced a rare synchronized nightmare. They saw themselves tied to a stone table in a cold cave under Harold's sharp knife. A little boy woke up in a panic, a red scratch on his neck like the mark of a terrible nightmare. The fear, like a virus, spread through the town, threatening to break the long-held wall of silence. While the group of teenagers were fleeing in chaos, Marcus was cornered and captured by Harold. He was brutally interrogated and locked in a cold cement room in the basement, the very place David had been held before. The suffocating atmosphere of the room and the darkness that separated Marcus from the outside world felt like a painful sentence. Trapped between the cold walls, Marcus felt a gentle movement in the cement wall behind him. The soft whispering grew louder, like the murmuring of dozens of imprisoned souls. The ghost of David appeared, placing his cold hand on Marcus's shoulder, and said in a low, sad voice mixed with comfort, "Don't be afraid, because I'm still here." This appearance gave Marcus strength, rekindling the fire of determination in his heart. Rachel, while trying to escape the police station with Danny, discovered that the iron box containing the valuable evidence of the town's crimes had been stolen. Danny remembered a vague memory. Someone in a police uniform had been following them when they left the station. However, this person was wearing a pumpkin mask that covered their face, making them unidentifiable. A chilling feeling permeated the air, signaling the presence of a force that was not just human. Halloween night reached its climax, but Hollow Creek was enveloped in a deathly silence. No houses were open, no lights were on, no children were calling for candy. Many townspeople were in costume but did not venture outside. Marcus looked out the window, discovering dozens of flickering eyes watching his every move from behind the thick curtains. The feeling of being watched and isolated reached its peak, as if the entire town was being stripped of life by a horrifying secret. In the middle of the night, Marcus was taken out of his cell. Harold stood there with a bitter smile, and said in a cold voice, "We have protected this town with blood, and anyone who opposes us will be the next one in the basement." What shocked him was that a number of townspeople were also in the station at that time, standing silently in the darkness. They knew all the truth, but chose to be silent to preserve Hollow Creek's fake peace. Halloween night was upon them. A little 6-year-old girl's witch costume shone in the dim yellow light of the empty street. Her mother had just turned her back to get candy from a nearby store, leaving her daughter flickering between the silent spaces with only the sound of falling leaves. Suddenly the little girl vanished without a trace. The security camera on the street made a loud buzzing sound, and the image in that time frame became completely white. However, before the electronic signal disappeared, a blurry frame showed the little girl holding hands with Leah, the teenage friend who had once disappeared and returned, which made everyone who saw it shiver. Marcus and a group of teenagers took refuge in the town's old church. The priest, an elderly man with world-weary eyes, had just stepped out when a series of blurry white figures appeared behind him from the darkness, standing in a straight line and remaining silent. These ghosts were the souls of people who had gone missing on Halloween many years ago, waiting for release but never getting it. The atmosphere became suffocating, heavy with despair mixed with resentment. The next morning, the police discovered a haunting scene at the base of the ancient oak tree behind the church.
The priest was found hanged, with his mouth sewn shut with barbed wire, creating a horrifying and suffocating picture. At his feet was a bloody scrawled message, like a bitter accusation: "Silent for too long, Father. You are also a sinner." This death sparked panic not only in the group of teenagers, but also among the town's residents. Hollow Creek was plunged into chaos. Many families frantically packed their belongings, rushing to leave town in the dark of night. However, continuous incidents occurred on the roads leading to the outskirts: fallen trees, unusual accidents, and roads that seemed to change direction and cause them to get lost. No one could get out of town, as if an invisible force was blocking every escape route. In the dead of night, Rachel woke up in a panic when she saw a figure sitting on the doorstep. It was her older sister, who had been missing for a long time, appearing hauntingly, with her stomach torn open and eyes soaked in dark red blood. The sister whispered words heavy with sadness: "A soul cannot be released until the blood is cleansed." These words were like salt rubbed into Rachel's festering wound, and they revealed the horrifying secret behind the disappearances.
Harold Finch, once the cold and ruthless controller, was no longer himself. He looked in the mirror in a small room and saw himself aging at a terrifying speed. His skin was saggy and rusty, as if he was rotting from the inside. He opened a desk drawer and was horrified to discover human fingernails scattered inside, like a deadly warning sign. His name was called out repeatedly in the silent room, making Harold anxious, as if he was possessed by an inescapable obsession. A curfew was issued, but no one obeyed. When a subordinate police officer refused to obey Harold's orders, he did not hesitate to shoot him dead on the spot. Even more terrifying, the police officer's body mysteriously disappeared from the cold room, leaving behind a pool of black water and handprints etched on the ceiling like a ghostly warning. The town slowly descended into chaos and fear, and no one listened to Harold's control anymore. A brave villager helped Marcus access the basement of the town hall. Here Marcus discovered a records room that was sealed with solid concrete. After breaking through the wall, he saw dozens of files on horrifying disappearances that spanned many years. Every file had the signature of Harold Finch, raising questions about his complicity. The teenagers who were taking refuge in the cemetery heard a weak call, echoing from deep within the cold ground. Danny was instinctively led by Leah's voice to dig. He discovered an undocumented tomb that contained traces of human bone sacrifices, with ancient symbols discreetly drawn on the stone slabs. The air around it was thick with magical power, more haunting and terrifying than ever. Following the map David had left in his notebook, Marcus went deeper into the forest on the northern side of town. There he discovered an ancient stone altar, covered in moss and fallen leaves. Leah was standing in front of the altar, her eyes completely black with no light at all. She turned to Marcus and spoke in a voice that was a mix of a child and an adult, shimmering with a ghostly and gloomy presence. "It's not just Harold. This town made a blood pact a very long time ago." The whispers seemed to guide the group to the old basement located under the small library of Hollow Creek. A thick, heavy stillness weighed down on the darkness. Rachel, with trembling hands, pulled a slick, human skin-bound book from a rotten shelf. The letters on the cover were blurry, and she could only make out the haunting title, Ritus Ombre, the Ritual of the Shadows. Each page was written in crimson ink, detailing circular sacrificial rituals. The ceremonial circle was identical to the cold stone room in the police station. The drawings of daggers, dripping blood, and ancient symbols were meticulously drawn, like the final words of the deadly secrets buried deep within Hollow Creek. The ancient notes Marcus found in the book and in the archives revealed a shocking truth. Hollow Creek was not a normal town. In 1831, 7 European families settled here, but to maintain eternal peace, they performed horrible sacrifices. They sacrificed children, considering it a guarantee of social stability and control. The Halloween festivals that started then had long since become a mandatory ritual, passed down through generations in the form of blood rituals, trapping souls that could not find peace and creating an unbreakable cycle of hauntings. Marcus discovered that Harold Finch was not the town's first demon. His father and grandfather had been the previous police chiefs who continued and maintained this bloody ritual. In Harold's secret room he found a notebook that recorded every detail of selecting victims, managing souls, hiding disappearances, and building a facade for the town. Everything was recorded over generations, like a dark legacy that Harold was carrying and could not escape. David appeared in front of Marcus in a more distinct ghostly form than ever before, his voice heavy with sadness. "We don't need to kill Harold. We need to stop the ritual, forever." David revealed the danger. If the ritual was not completed on Halloween night, the curse would reverse itself, burning down the entire town, including the souls that had been trapped for so long. It was a vicious cycle of life and death, a collective punishment instead of an individual one. When Harold discovered that Marcus's group was looking through the files and secrets, he flew into a rage. Leading his 2 loyal henchmen, he furiously chased the teenagers. His words hissed like sharp knives. "You won't die quickly." No longer a cold police chief, Harold appeared as a demon incarnate, ready to burn everything to preserve the town's ritual of survival. Rachel was separated and locked in the dilapidated restroom. The iron door chained shut from the outside. The mirror on the wall slowly blurred. Then the face of her sister, who had been missing for so long, appeared, haggard and gaunt. The sister trembled and pointed toward the small vent high above. "The way out is where you came in." The words were like an echo from the dead, suggesting a fragile but dangerous escape route, shining a faint light in the thick darkness. And in the cold stone room beneath the police station, even though no one was close, fresh blood from the ritual grooves on the stone table suddenly seeped out strongly, as if the souls were reenacting the ancient ritual, wanting to complete a circle that had never ended. The air was more suffocating than ever, and the faint light on the stone walls seemed to scream, even though no one could hear it. Marcus voluntarily surrendered to Harold in exchange for the teenagers' freedom. "Let the children go. I'll take their place." Harold nodded in agreement, but then turned on him. "It's not enough. 7 people must take their place." The pressure and danger made every plan urgent, pushing the characters into a dark corner where they had to choose between life and sacrifice. When they were recaptured, the teenagers discovered a small sacrificial room next to them for the guide souls. Inside, Danny found the corpse of a child wearing a pumpkin mask. This was the same one the group had seen wandering around town, the terrifying Halloween mascot, with a legend dating back to 1831. The existence of this mascot revealed a profound secret. The souls had been transformed into ghosts that watched over the town for centuries. When Harold was preparing to complete the ritual, the imprisoned souls began to stir. A whistling sound of wind came from the cracks that had just appeared on the basement walls. The first ghost, the child sacrificed in 1831, walked to the stone table. Its eyes were glaring as it looked straight at Harold with a whisper, "You are no longer the one in control." A tidal wave of supernatural resistance surged, signaling the collapse of the Blood Pact and the coming freedom for the souls as well as the surviving residents of Hollow Creek. In the last 3 hours of Halloween night, Marcus and Rachel were stunned by the horrifying reality. 7 children in town had vanished without a trace. Each child had a strange commonality. They had all touched the strange pumpkin masks covered in bizarre patterns. When they checked the security camera footage, Marcus and Rachel noticed something unusual. All of them disappeared in an area near the ancient stone altar, which had been mentioned many times and was connected to the town's bloody rituals. A group of local residents, led by a stranger who appeared from the edge of town, discovered a second stone altar located deep in the dense forest. On the surface of the stone table were symbols and names of each of the families who had founded Hollow Creek since its inception. A notable new name had just been added, Harold Finch, the successor of this dark ritual. This discovery signaled a shift in power taking place from the darkness. When Harold tried to perform the sacrificial ritual on Marcus, a strange thing happened. Blood seeped back up his arm like fire, burning every joint. A child in a pumpkin mask stood next to him, preventing him from touching the altar. This made Harold panic and scream, "No, I am the chosen one." These signs showed that his power was slowly weakening, challenged by the supernatural forces of the souls that had been imprisoned for too long. Rachel found a secret chapter in the Ritus Umbrae book that was locked with dead man's blood. She used her sister's blood, kept in an old necklace, to open the lock and read a classic reversal ritual, Liberatio per ignem, which means liberation through fire. However, this ritual required a living person to voluntarily sacrifice their life to take the place of all the imprisoned souls, putting the group in a difficult life or death decision. When the group tried to find a way out of town, Danny was suddenly possessed by a ghost from 1997, who spoke in a clear adult voice. "We don't need anyone to die for us, only the blood debtor must repay with blood." These words opened up a new depth to the dark law of karma in Hollow Creek, stating that the price had to be fair and could not be avoided by sacrificing others. Right at midnight on Halloween, the 7 missing children reappeared in the town's main square. However,
They were no longer normal children. With pale faces and deep, bottomless black eyes, the children spoke in unison with a cold voice. Hollow Creek once belonged to blood, now it will belong to souls. The physical and spiritual transformation of the children signaled a dark power transfer that was being completed. Harold, in a panic after the soul's refusal to grant him authority, got into his police car and tried to flee the town. But after only a few hundred yards, the car lights suddenly went out, and the radio played an old recording of the people he had killed calling his name in desperation. The car broke down in the middle of the road, the doors automatically locked, and he was trapped in the darkness, facing an inescapable punishment. From the top of the church, Marcus watched the entire town covered in dozens of motionless white shadows, like a ghostly funeral procession. Each soul carried a personal item that was lost, a watch, a bracelet, or a bag of candy. The sky was stained red by a rising blood moon, signaling a fateful night that would end centuries of pain. Harold was led to the altar. The pumpkin mask was removed, revealing the ghostly face of the first child who was sacrificed, a symbol of the dark power he once held. Marcus, Rachel, and the group of teenagers stood and witnessed the scene as dozens of souls surrounded Harold, but did not touch him. Instead, Harold burst into flames in a fire of souls, like the natural justice for an unforgivable sin. After Harold's death, no one could leave Hollow Creek. The souls did not vanish but remained, wandering in the cold morning fog, becoming an inseparable part of the town. Rachel whispered in a moment of fake peace, "We haven't stopped the ritual yet. We've only just exposed it." These words opened up a new horizon for the story, signaling that terrifying challenges and mysteries were still ahead. November 1st arrived, but Hollow Creek no longer heard the dawn. The sky was still as dark as an endless night. The calendars on Marcus's, Rachel's, and all the electronic devices in town were stuck at 11:59 p.m. on October 31st. Time seemed to have stopped. A boy in the group whispered, "I've had 5 breakfasts, but the clock still hasn't moved to a new day." The gloomy atmosphere was not just about the light, but also about the frantic breathing of a living curse, an endless Halloween, where life and death had become one. When a group of people tried to escape from town, every road led them back to the central square, like a sealed death maze. Radio waves, GPS signals, and even phones were either dead or interrupted, and they could only hear one single frequency echoing, "Riotus umbrae, non es finita." The faint voice was like a haunting summons, showing that Hollow Creek no longer belonged to the real world. The altar was burnt black, but Harold's body had vanished without a trace. Instead, a strange medallion was left on the stone table, carved with a symbol of 7 interlocking circles, a symbol that had once appeared in the Riotus Umbrae ritual book. Rachel stared at it, realizing that it was the seal for the gateway between the world of the living and the souls, like a warning that everything was not over, but had only just begun. The children who had been possessed by souls suddenly fell unconscious. When they woke up, they had no memory of what happened, and a faint inscription was etched on the palm of each of their hands, Aurum, which is ancient Latin for bridge. The small hands now played an important role in Hollow Creek's endless and mysterious cycle, connecting the past and the present in an unavoidable vicious circle. Rachel met Leah again in the daytime, which was filled with a thick darkness. Leah was silent, and just pointed to the ground at her feet. Marcus dug according to the instructions, and discovered a large black stone slab carefully sealed with dried blood. The stone had a chilling inscription carved deep into it, "The second door. When it opens, it's the end." The ghostly gateway was not just a door to the spirit world, but also the final point of all the horrifying secrets and truths that had not yet been revealed. The ground of the town was constantly shaking with small tremors, like a silent heartbeat in the earth. The old walls around Hollow Creek began to crumble, revealing ancient characters with intertwined images of skulls and a pierced sun. Rachel translated the mysterious inscription, "Death comes from loyalty, and also ends with betrayal." These words were like a prophecy about a dark, buried truth, a key point to either destroy the curse or make it rise up more fiercely than ever. In a tattered part of the Ritus Umbrae, Marcus discovered a special note. If the living voluntarily offer their life but the souls refuse, the ritual will reverse itself. David appeared next to Marcus, whispering in a restless voice, "I refused, brother. That's why the gate hasn't closed." The resistance of David's soul not only kept the gate open, but also made all the town's sealing plots fragile and unstable. Rachel suggested a way to end the curse permanently. They had to seal the 3 places where the souls were trapped. The ancient stone altar, the police station, where many pained souls were kept, The Covenant Room, the old abandoned school that was the source of it all. Marcus, Rachel, and the group decided to split up and act, facing danger and unknown variables. For the first time, some residents of Hollow Creek spoke up to help the children. They brought relics of their missing loved ones, items that were like spiritual keys for the sealing ritual. An old lady looked at Marcus with regret. "We were wrong, but at least now we can help bury this pain forever." That was the turning point that marked the awakening of the town, when silence and fear slowly gave way to hope and action. When the group began the sealing ritual at the stone altar, an unimaginable thing happened. A cold hand reached out from under the black stone slab. It wasn't Harold's, and it wasn't a ghost. It was an image of another Marcus, his face icy, and his eyes stark white with no life in them. Rachel backed away, whispering in horror, "The ritual isn't incomplete. The gate has opened, and it has chosen the next person." The cold hand was like a terrifying prophecy, that the story was not over, but that a new dark cycle had begun with a heavy price, and endless challenges for those who dared to look directly into the darkness. Rachel fell into a state of panic as the two versions of Marcus faced each other. The real Marcus and the Marcus who emerged from the black stone slab both had complete memories of their shared past. Both remembered David, and both were wearing the family heirloom necklace. Both claimed to be the true owner of this painful story. The confusion left Rachel in a state of extreme bewilderment, and she asked herself, if no one knows who you are, then which one is the fake? A question lingered in her mind, like a knife cutting the thin line between truth and illusion. The 7 children who had been rescued began to lose their physical forms, becoming transparent, like ghosts floating between the real world and the afterlife. Their eyes were empty, dark, and lifeless. They whispered like a cold warning, "We are no longer bound to this body." Rachel understood this clearly. If the gate was not closed properly, the souls would vanish forever, losing all ability to exist in the world of the living. When Rachel accidentally stumbled in the churchyard, the ground under her feet broke open, revealing a large, ancient blood map meticulously carved with dried blood onto the stone floor. The map accurately marked 3 sealing points for the ritual: the stone altar, the police station, and the old school. But a 4th point in the center of the town square remained an unknown variable that no one knew about. The map was like a warning that this was the crucial location that would decide Hollow Creek's fate. The fake Marcus convinced the villagers that the real Marcus was the one intentionally trying to stop the sealing ritual and maintain the curse on Hollow Creek. The villagers, in their confusion and fear, captured the real Marcus and locked him in the basement of the abandoned chapel, the same place where witches were tried centuries ago. This separation increased the tension between the survivors and those who were affected by the curse. While trying to save Marcus, Rachel accidentally touched an ancient cross in the chapel. She collapsed and fell into a state of unconsciousness. In a trance, Rachel experienced a series of intertwined memories. In one memory, she was the one who redeemed the town's soul. In another, she was the first to be sacrificed, the one who spread the horrifying curse. When she woke up, she was confused, not knowing if she was still herself, or if she had been torn between 2 realities, one divine and one dark. David's ghost appeared in the gloomy room, looking at both versions of Marcus. David said clearly, "Only one person buried my body with his own hands. The other one only heard the story." The real Marcus burst into tears as he remembered burying his brother's last bone fragment in the forest with his own hands, establishing his true identity in front of everyone. Marcus and Rachel led the group to the town square, the intersection of the 3 sealed gates. According to the ritual, they took turns burning 3 objects that represented blood, bones, and memory. A sacrificial knife engraved with Harold's name, the bones of the first child sacrificed in 1831, and David's old notebook. The fire blazed, making the air around them suffocating, full of tension and hope. When the ritual was almost complete, the fake Marcus suddenly went insane, and his face changed. His skin peeled off, revealing a cold gray ash color underneath, and a tongue like cold stone. He screamed, "You ended me, but Hollow Creek still rests on blood." This transformation was like a final warning that the curse could not be easily extinguished by human hands. The final ghostly gate swung wide open, creating a black crack in the sky, sucking all sound, air, and memories around it into nothingness. Everyone had to hold on to each other tightly so they would not be sucked into that chaotic space. The souls that had not found peace voluntarily stepped into the gate, taking with them the secrets and dark memories on their eternal journey. After the ritual ended, a flash of white light swept across the town. Everything returned to peace. The sky was bright, and the clocks on their phones jumped to November 1st. However, when Marcus opened the map on his phone, there were no signs of Hollow Creek anymore. It was as if it had been erased from the world map. Rachel was holding David's notebook, and when she opened the last page, the page was blank except for one line of text. The curse only truly ends when no one remembers. Marcus opened his eyes in a cold hospital room, the harsh white light shining down on a strange setting. A doctor stood next to him, his face serious. Marcus asked in a tired voice, "What about the town of Hollow Creek?" The doctor frowned and replied in a confused voice, "There has never been a town with that name in our city's records. There were no traces of such a place on the map or in the geographical data." Marcus tried to find information about Rachel through the internet, files, notebooks and personal devices. There were no clues about Rachel's existence. In Marcus's notebook, the notes about Rachel faded to the point of being almost unreadable. A photo of them together on Marcus's phone also disappeared, leaving only a gloomy, foggy sky and a blurry figure in the distance, like a cosmic trace preserving a fragmented memory. Marcus went to the city library, searching through the old archives for traces of the mysterious land. Only one small article appeared. A serious gas accident occurred in a national forest, which led to the residential area being permanently sealed off. The article did not mention any names related to Hollow Creek, its residents, or the mysterious disappearances. The truth had been distorted and hidden in the shadows of time. Marcus tried to find every person who had helped him on his journey. They now lived scattered across various states with small normal jobs. When he asked about Hollow Creek, they all avoided the question or said they didn't know, but their eyes broke rhythmically as if they were suppressing a horrifying memory. A deep fear, as if they were bound in their minds, forced them to forget the things they couldn't remember. In Marcus's suitcase was a torn red piece of fabric from Rachel's Halloween dress, wrapped around a small black stone, a fragment of the altar. Under the fabric was a message written in faint, scrawled ink. "I remember you, and I remember everything, but we are not allowed to tell." The vague and haunting message was like a vow to keep a secret between the boundary of life and death. In a street corner in New York, Marcus was startled to see a small child wearing a pumpkin mask, holding a bucket of candy. He ran over and called out, and the child turned and smiled at him in a friendly way. "You got us out. Thank you." Just a few seconds later, it dissolved into grey dust amid the flickering yellow lights of the city, leaving Marcus with a series of unanswered questions. When he reopened David's map, which he thought had been burned, Marcus discovered a layer of paper underneath that had another town drawn on it, Ash Willow, with a red blood circle around it, and the note, "The second place, Plan B." The appearance of the second town increased the worry about a dangerous cycle that was spreading beyond Hollow Creek. While studying the mysterious symbols on the black stone, Marcus met a retired professor of theology who had been tracking numerous cases of mass spiritual evaporation in the United States. He looked closely at the symbol and said, "You just chopped the root, but the seeds have already flown." The message showed that even though he had closed the gate in Hollow Creek, this curse or haunting had spread and could not be easily destroyed. One day, Marcus caught a glimpse of Rachel standing across the street through the window of a bus. She was wearing a white dress, with her soft hair down. She smiled gently and put a finger to her lips, signaling him to be silent. "Don't tell anyone, let the dead rest in peace." The words were like a final warning to Marcus about the things they should not provoke or reveal. In another distant rural area, a lonely boy was playing with an old pumpkin mask he had found in a storage box. He put on the mask and everything slowly turned dark. The streetlights flickered restlessly, and a faint whisper began to echo everywhere. The screen went black, and only the words appeared, "Some curses don't end, they relocate."
So what's the lesson behind all this? Sometimes what keeps a community alive isn't order, but shared fear. And the most terrifying thing may not be the evil, but the silence that lets it grow. If this story gave you chills, leave a comment, share the video, and help Whisper Horror Channel bring these literary nightmares to even more listeners. We'll see you next time, where the unsaved souls still whisper from the dark. Not all curses end, some simply relocate.